Well, if it hasn't been strange enough up until now, it's going to get stranger. Cosmology is quite a thing. When we left off, we had everything hurtling along in space and getting ready to meet its initiator. Talked about the violence of initiation, that so much, by the way, just an interesting sidebar, this year, right now, is the 100th anniversary of Albert Einstein's E equals mc squared. And I thought that was just a kind of interesting thing. There was this enormous article, one of these science writers, the kinds of people who can be so good at describing the deeply complex and simple ways, trying to explain theory of relativity to a newspaper audience. And it was so interesting to read the presentation of it and to understand how deep the limitation is of what it really represents in terms of the truth. It was like the story of the Sphinx. You know, nobody really understood the Sphinx, and the Sphinx was something mysterious for a very, very, very long time. And it was so interesting with the aspects of the Sphinx. You know, the beast, the man, the bird. All of these various qualities that are there. And the moment that you went from one wheel or one concept of the nature of being and you added a second wheel, what we have in design, only then could you see a cross. I mean, that's the most extraordinary thing about incarnation crosses, and why they are so deeply connected to the monopole and to what it is to be the illusion of being in these forms. If you're only looking at one wheel, you only have a polarity. As a matter of fact, in astrology, there wouldn't even be a polarity because they do not position the Earth. And the moment that you look at the polarity on one side and the polarity on the other side, and you put the two of them together, whoop, all of a sudden you actually do have a Sphinx. That Sphinx that is, in astrological terms, the heart of Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio. And only then does it emerge. And one of the things to see so clearly, and it is what we will deal with in the second semester in depth, is to understand the other side of relativity, to understand the mechanical dimensions underneath. And everything that we're really looking at in terms of this cosmology is a language that's trying to describe what's underneath the light. There is no illusion yet. Think about that. There is no illusion yet. The illusion, in a sense, that is experienced as the totality for what it is. After all, that cannot emerge until the consciousness of what we would call humans emerged. Because after all, nothing contemplated it. Nothing had any self-reflected relationship to it. And in fact, the illusion of the whole, the illusion of existence, really only emerged with the emergence of the self-reflected consciousness. In fact, the joke for me about Einstein's relativity is that it is only as old as the human neocortex, and no older. Born out of the illusion of, through the potential of self-reflected consciousness. But until the emergence of a neocortex, there is only the mechanical unfolding of the potential of what the illusion will demonstrate. In this illustration, what we are looking at is, an attempt to show you the bundle smashing into one of these stars of the wall. And obviously we're talking about, from our perspective, what would appear to be a cataclysmic event. In other words, the kinds of things that we see through our, advanced telescopes and spectral studies of the biverse, where we see these enormous explosions where, the shock wave of the explosion is still being experienced a billion years later because of the enormity of it. Some of these beautiful star clouds that we see in the sky that is nothing more than the leftover, like the Magellan Cloud, nothing more than the leftover of an enormous nova that took place, eons ago. It's so interesting about the night sky for me, this frozenness in a way, the way in which time is layered the further you're able to look back. But what we're dealing with is just simply this mechanical developing. Think about it in the same way that you think about the fetus developing. The fetus before the personality. The fetus before it is anything that we can call human. Just the meat, but the meat being organized into a bio-life form. Here we have the biverse being organized, into a form. Remember that. It may be very difficult for us to conceptualize the totality from the inside, but the reality is that there is a form. So all of this that we're seeing, that in fact is taking place over billions of years, remember that the bundle, according to the voice, moved through the beginnings of the biverse for several billion years before anything happened. Before it had this event. And of course this event is really the beginning of the potential for the ultimate life. You can see that in the way in which conception stages operate in the fetus. That there are a number of stages before there is actually the potential for life. The setting up of the stage upon which the platform of life can be built. And all of this enormous energy flowing out into the void, all of this light being chased after by the neutrino string, that all of it is racing out there to form the parameters of and to bring about the potential of the conditioning field. Now there's something to understand about conditioning at the consciousness level in terms of the form. It is done by specific objects, and specific objects endowed with what we would call personality crystals. And this is something to be clear about. You will see in terms of the way in which this cosmology is laid out, that there are certain stars, certain planets that we have a particular relationship to because we have a particular relationship to the way in which we are programmed by them. And again, to see that in the understanding this program, what we're understanding is actually two things together, one exoteric and one esoteric. The exoteric is that we know that stars are the only thing, other than the oddity of Earth, stars are the only thing that produce neutrinos, and this is the programming agency. So that's the exoteric. The esoteric is that the star is endowed with a crystal. And it is that crystal through which the neutrino programming information is focused. In other words, that the stars have their unique information feed. We're going to look at some of them through our process. So, the potential for life would require something. That is, it would require the shattering of the bundle, and in the shattering of the bundle, the seeding of the crystals to the emerging forms. And the first emerging forms are what we call stars. Rather quickly. When you get to this point of around 2 billion years, this is when it really starts to happen. When you see the very, very earliest galaxies being formed. All of this is taking place around this time, and this is when the seeding is taking place. So here in this illustration we have the bundle penetrated to the core of the star of the wall. The cracking ripped apart the star. The prime magnetic monopole was disembedded from the prime design crystal as the crystal itself shattered. So you have the prime magnetic monopole being disembedded from the prime design crystal. Now we know clearly, because this is one of the most important things to understand in crystal mechanics, is this profound relationship between the monopole and the design. And at the moment that the monopole and the design separate, you actually have a potential for life. A potential for life. So here we have this extraordinary event that's taking place. This whacking into this star. And by the way, this is a phenomenon that takes place all the time. I mean, this is just a primary example in that sense. So you have the monopole disembedding from the design crystal. Now what's interesting for me is that this is a violent act. It's a violent act. And when you look at stages of conception, you see exactly the same moment. And it's clear to me that at some microcosmic level, that there is also this similar kind of violence that initiates the potential of life. It's like these classic Frankenstein movies, you know, where Frankenstein lays his monster out under a stormy night with the lightning flying away so that he can pump this enormous shock of electricity into this inanimate thing and wake it up. And it is clear to me that there is a microcosmic moment that matches this macrocosmic moment, this shock that disembeds the monopole. It does not come out voluntarily. It doesn't. And at the same time that the monopole disembeds, it only disembeds through the shattering of this design crystal. Now, this shattering is something of enormous importance to us because each and every one of us are carrying an aspect of this shattering. We were all there. That's the real magic. We were all there. All of us. You know, the crystals that are in us, they participated in this drama. So we are carrying the continuity of this process in time through this long movement of the geometry. The monopole was hurtled away from the mass and caught in a cosmic spin. And this spin is really something. I mean, the whole thing about the monopole is that the monopole only attracts. We know that. It's a monopole. And here we have the prime magnetic monopole. And it gets caught in a spin. That is, the spin as the byproduct of it being shattered away and disembedded from the prime magnetic, from the prime design crystal, that this spin is at a rate that we cannot imagine. I mean, you can't imagine anything turning that fast. And in that very act of turning so fast, its ability to even hold itself together collapses. Just collapses. Now the monopole doesn't shatter, it tears apart. When the dervish dances, this is the celebration of love, which initiated consciousness. You know, this spinning. Go back to any ancient culture. Go back to any event, spiritual, mystical event, and you will find the spinners, the ones who turn and turn and turn. You can see it in your children sometime. It's something we all know. It's something deep inside of us. You know, this spinning until you're totally, absolutely dizzy. The mastering of spinning so that you're never dizzy. You know, as a Canadian growing up with ice, you know, I used to watch all the girls practice their spins, you know, and they would spin and spin and spin. The dervish. This is how the monopole disintegrated in a sense, you know, blew apart in a sense, was torn apart. Okay, I've changed the illustration again, and it's in the browser. The fragments of the core all begin to manifest their individual aspects. It was the dog, for example, that built the body of that sun. And we will talk about the dog next time. One of the most extraordinary things I was told. By the way, it's just a crystal. It's just a crystal. There were many other ingredients in the bundle when it fused with the star. The prime magnetic monopole before this event could best be described as a cluster. The power of the monopole is to attract at this stage all of its aspects. Monopoles in harmony with a single prime design crystal were as one. When the design crystal shattered, the harmony was broken. The law of the monopole is hold on to everything. The shattering destabilized the monopole cluster. The spin was more powerful than the prime magnetic monopole's capacity to keep the cluster together. Every fragment of the shattered design crystal was seeded with a monopole aspect from the cluster. Now think about the magic of that. Every single shattered crystal was married, if you will, to an aspect of the monopole. Each and every one of them carrying in their microcosm the ability to form this bond with the monopoles. And at the same moment that the larger life is initiated, the biverse, the child, whatever we want to call it, at the same moment that that is initiated, there are zillions of aspects that are design and monopole as one, waiting for their time to disembed in their process of bringing about the completion of this formation, of this form that ultimately can house consciousness. See, it's not about us, if you know what I mean. I mean, we are an aspect of this vast program of trying is not the right word, this vast program of form evolving to a point that consciousness can operate through it. And we have to see that we are caught deeply in the middle of this, in a way. We're not in charge of the programming. Not yet, anyway. You know, we are simply caught in the middle because we are where the experiment is visible. I mean, that's the magic of being you and me. You know, the magic of being you and me is that we are the microcosm of the purpose of the totality, which is a rather beautiful thing to think about. But that truly is what we are. You know, we are the example that it works. Despite the ignorance and blindness and lameness of how we experience in the illusion consciousness, the fact is that self-reflected consciousness has not only emerged, but it is demonstrated how fertile and profound it is. That form indeed not only can house consciousness, but the evolvement of the form can reach levels of consciousness that are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you know, just the fact of our minds and the way in which they operate. You know, never mind thinking about what it will mean to be a rave and to have a solar plex mutation that offers a stage for self-reflected consciousness that is unlike anything we can imagine. The evidence already exists that the formula, you know, this original formula, the life formula, you know, that it actually works. That it works. I've changed the illustration. This is just something general because I want to begin to show you the formula, and through the formula perhaps we can begin to grasp many different things, particularly the nature of fractals and the way fractal line works. what we're looking at here is the center and the 88 alphas. This is the, again, we are dealing with cosmological language. And I will describe, obviously, each of them as we go through. But to best understand the center and the 88 alphas is to understand that I'm describing certain specific crystals, and these specific crystals are part of that design bundle that are being shattered. And all of these crystals that we're looking at in the image, all of these crystals are the aspects that surround the very center. Okay, so let me go through the copy first, and then I will come back. First of all, the business of the center. It is not the middle, and this is not a riddle. Imagine you have a crystal and you pass a beam of light through it. The light, filtered by the crystal, manifests a pattern. Imagine then that you shatter this crystal into untold trillions of fragments. Each fragment, having the same beam of light pass through it, will manifest a unique pattern. All, that is, except one. One fragment will manifest the same pattern in microcosm. This is the center. So it's something very important to grasp. What the center represents is that it represents a microcosmic crystal that actually has the same potential as the whole. Quite something to think about. But it also says that crystal is the center at the very core of the shattering. I mean, imagine you could see a crystal and you could see it shatter, and you could see it shatter in incredible slow motion. And you could measure dynamically the core of the shattering. In other words, that place within the crystal in which everything is shattering outwards from it, in the same way that our universe is expanding. In other words, the expansion in the shattering, all moving away from a central point, not a middle point, but a central point. And the thing that makes it the central point is that this core, this single fragment at the core, that it has the same perspective as the crystal before it was shattered. Doesn't have the same nuance, obviously, but it has the same perspective. Now, what is very, very important to grasp is that if you can imagine this in 3D, and you can think about this core crystal, the center. Now, what you have to imagine is that there are aspects that are breaking away from that core. And there are certain aspects that are right next to it, that actually shatter away from it. Now, unfortunately, I don't have my beautiful little laser pen to take you through these illustrations. But if you can look at the top illustration on the left. Now, what you're looking at in that top illustration in the left is that this is the center and the 88 alphas before the crystal shatters. If you look over to the right, first of all, you have that single triangle by itself, the second image from the right above. That single triangle, this is the graphic for the center. And that you can see, if you look at the center in the images to the left, it appears that the black triangle is sitting in a white box. But it's not. What you're looking at is the two aspects that were the last things to break away from the core. In other words, two crystals, in that sense, that were housing the center between them. This is the camel and the dog. These are very special crystals, and we'll talk about them because they live in our sun, and they're responsible for our consciousness, or at least the way in which our consciousness is programmed on a day-to-day basis. The next thing that you look at is that if you look to the lower left, the illustration of this little diamond that has the camel and the dog and the center in the middle, the triangle with the white square, or what appears to be a white square, and you can see these 4 numbers there. These are called the 4 corners. Now, what I really want you to grasp is that as these things move out, they're moving out in fractal lines. In other words, only the camel and the dog are a first-generation fractal to the center. I mean, this is something really to grasp. In other words, they completely shroud that center. So nothing else, even though in the diagram it looks like the edges of the triangle on the left and the right will hit the 2 corner and the 4 corner, it doesn't. It doesn't. It is shrouded in the camel and the dog. So when you're looking at the 4 corners, they are second generation on the fractal. Now what I mean is that any one of those corners, its connection to the center takes 2 steps. In other words, it's got to go through either whatever, the dog or the camel, and then to the center. And you're going to see that this moves out further and further. So when I talk about people's relationship on a fractal line, what I'm actually talking about is that your crystal, let's say your personality crystal, and my personality crystal, if we're on a fractal together, that means that following this pathway, there is a pathway, generation by generation, in which you may be, 5 generations away, 8 generations away, on a specific fracturing line. And there's many, because you can see in the middle illustration, in the bottom, these are the 16 faces. And that you can see that these 16, this is what holds inside of it the 4 corners, the camel, the dog, and the center. And that you can see that the next fractal line out is going from the 2 to the 4, and it's going from the 4 all the way out again. And there you have your 16 out there. Now, one of the things about the 16 that we'll see is that it actually breaks up into 2 parts. The 1 to the 8 and the 9 to the 16. And they represent 2 different lines of fractal. And then finally, the whole thing is within the 66 sides. So that the illustration on the bottom right, if you start putting the various pieces back into it, you end up with the illustration on the top left. And this is the final aspects of what we're going to see out of these, from the 16 faces to the 66 sides. We're going to see all kinds of stellar influence. In other words, these are aspects that are going to have a very, very important component in terms of programming us. And we're also going to see out of the 66 sides that they represent very powerful incarnative forces. By the way, every single aspect that you're looking at one time or another in the history of the development of consciousness in this place, this planet, that these various crystals have incarnated into form. Not always into, as a matter of fact, rarely into human form, but into forms here on the planet. So what we're looking at is that we're looking at the core of the crystal bundle that was shattered when it met the star of the wall. And in looking at that core, we can begin to break that core up into its various components. Every god and goddess the humanity has ever had can be found in one of the 16 faces. Every one. And whether you're talking about, what we would call, for example, lunar goddesses, of which there are so many even in the Mediterranean culture, 7, 8, 9 of them, and to really see very clearly that they all represent a certain face. So every god, this is the global orchestration directory, or at least all of this is going to lead to the global orchestration directories, the gods. And those 16 faces are fascinating because it represents all the faces of what we call the divine. Curious thing to think about. Just imagine that we call something divine that is a personality crystal in an inanimate form. And we see ourselves as corruptions, with a personality crystal in these physical bodies. How interesting that the divine is just inanimate programming, and we're convinced that these are gods and goddesses. I mean, convinced. I mean, we kill each other over this shit, all the time. All the time. Well, there they are. They're aspects, primary aspects, fascinating aspects, but they're programming agents, and they're not alive. I mean, not in the sense of life as we understand it. They are part of the life force, and that they are able to function out of the life of a star, which is a terminal thing after all. And we will talk about that as well, because this particular program of ours is coming to an end, and many aspects of the program are beginning to collapse, and that is something else. Okay, let me see here. Well, I told you that this would be weird, so let's just deal with the weirdness of it. First of all, you can see in the illustration above, you can see now where this illustration of the previous plate, how it fits into the crystal as a whole. And you can see it's described as the core around the center, eventual Rave personality crystals. And it's embedded in the crystal body of eventual Rave prime design crystals. It's also something to understand that the design aspects are further down the fractal line than the personality aspects. But also the joke of the illusion that they're both coming out of the same thing in that sense. Remember that the two is cellular, that is, it is building the physical body of the universe, the rocks and stones and moons and stars and planets and all those other things. And here what you're dealing with is consciousness form creators. This is the consciousness field at work. These are the interpreters of the consciousness field. These are the aspects that are going to be able to filter the neutrino information, and these are the aspects whose only function is to get us to a place where we demonstrate self-reflected consciousness. There are two centers. Both are now on Earth. The two center, manifesting the body of the universe, and the band center, manifesting the universal mind. The two center dwells near the core of the earth, and has been there for 2.4 billion years. During the present global round, which began in 16,101 BC, the two center has incarnated in Rave form 62 times. The band center dwells in the heart of stars, at the source of the string. In this round, when not at its place at the heart of the Rave sun, it is incarnated 8 times. One of the things that was always so curious for me was numbers and dates. I mean, I think the most fascinating thing at some level in my whole relationship with my encounter was the way in which I was given information. Not only was I given all this deeply, deeply logical information, and there I was graphing things out and all of this stuff, but I was given dates for things. I mean, dates. When things were initiated and all this kind of stuff. It was incredible for me. It was just so odd. It just seemed so odd. I mean, who the hell cares about how many times the two center incarnated? I mean, it's not like I would have asked. And then in the humility that comes from such an experience, you think, well, you're told this for a reason, man. There is something deeply significant in all of this. If you think about the two centers, that is the center at the heart of the band, the center at the heart of the two, and that they represent, as we have seen, that is, they are the microcosmic. Then one of the things that is so fascinating is they're incarnating, and what those incarnations represented. What those 62 incarnations of the two represented, what those, 8 incarnations of the band center represented. I always have a difficult thing with, with sharing some of what seemed to be the matter aspects of the knowledge that I was given. I have never tried to make anything other of myself than the fact that I'm an obvious messenger, and that's a handle that I can live with. I'm really blessed with the fact that because of the very beauty and logic of human design, that I did not have to make my way as a messenger by getting people to believe in me. It was one of the most frightening things for me in my whole process with the voice, is that I was willing to accept that I had had an extraordinary experience. I wasn't really ready to face the possibility that I would have to tell other people about it. Just the utter madness of telling somebody that you know how everything works because a voice told you. I mean, it is the epitome of wacko. And that was very obvious to me. There was no point in my process where, there wasn't a part of me saying, hey, this is really psychotic, or, this is very bizarre, you're having a multi-personality, this and that, you're going through this and that. I mean, I was deeply clinical of my own experience. It was so obvious to me that, if you stripped away the logic that I had been given, and if I had been just stuck with telling people about the cosmology and who I am, human design would still be something, limited to very, very few beings. I have a very, very tight aura. I am not somebody who could ever have lived out that kind of life, and I'm very, very uncomfortable with the needs of others when they're confronted with my kind of personality or gift or whatever it is. So one of the things that was always very difficult for me was the many things that the voice told me about myself. I had an extraordinary event there was this old cracked mirror. It was actually just a shard of mirror that I had stuck into the stone of the broken down wall of the ruina. So every once in a while I could see how bizarre I looked, because I looked bizarre. I lived off the land then. I probably didn't weigh more than maybe 110 pounds. I was bone thin. I was living a very strange life. And I had this experience one evening of staring into being brought out by the voice, and being brought to this mirror and standing there for what seemed to me hours on end, while these milky apparitions, faces that the voice claimed were mine, faces that I was watching go by like a kind of cosmic Rolodex of past lives. It was very bizarre. It was not particularly interesting, though. There were moments that were very curious for me, because there were moments of recognition, not in the sense that I was Cleopatra, but recognition in the sense of, something inside of me just simply resonated to a quality of a time, or a feeling of a being, or whatever. It was very strange. And I went through this process that lasted almost a complete day. Probably 12 or 13 or 14 hours of being told about me and stuff and blah blah blah. And this is when I was given my title. This is when I was told that I was supposed to use the name Uruhu after the Ra. The title is a title that goes with the last incarnation of the Ban and the Two. So, in fact, according to the voice, I am Ra Uruhu, the Bantu. And the whole thing about the voice was that it, supposedly those were the crystals that I was operating with. Now, one of the things that's so interesting about that is that part of my mystical event was actually to physically take a crystal from the outside into my body. By the way, I'm in the middle of making a documentary film about this that will be released on the 20th anniversary in January of 2007. And it's been very strange for me to, reminisce is not a good word for all this. It can be very distorting. I'm deeply aware of the risks of any kind of claims to anything. And, I never saw any value in running around telling anybody that I was this or that. Not that it would make any damn difference whatsoever. And for me, when I look at cosmology, I have always treated cosmology as gray. That is, this is what I was told, but, how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to know? So, it's always interesting for me when I have to deal with telling the story of the cosmology is, to see how through the voice I was linked to all of this. I have no way of knowing. In the same way that the voice told me that this is the last incarnation that I will ever have, that the crystals that I carry in fact will be annihilated, that this is the end of the yang-yang developmental process, and that I'm the archetype of the yang-yang. All of those things are interesting and make for interesting cosmology, and I assume it'll make for interesting cosmology, particularly when I'm dead. Just the fact that they're even stated. I was told very strange things, and the kind of things that mad people usually claim, that they were this or that or the other, and I'm not going to talk about those things. So for me, whenever I get to this point, it's a kind of odd experience. It's strange too. I have a hat, and it says Bantu on it, and every once in a while I wear that hat, and it's always so odd about the way in which people react to it. And I'm not talking about people in design. Just my going down to the local tobacco store to pick up my newspaper, and it's very odd, just the impact of even just the spelling. I guess it just there's a certain wonder in people. So I don't know. It's very interesting. However, I do know something rather extraordinary about the way in which the Bantu operates, is that in fact they never truly incarnate into form. They use something very, very odd. And if you've been in design for the last 15 years, you've never heard me say what I'm about to say, because nobody's ever heard it before. There's something called an engram, and there are 17 of them that are incarnated, in a sense, in beings on this planet right now, always. And they are basically interpreters of neutrino information that come from core crystals. So if there's any truth in what the voice said about my carrying the two in the band thematically, is that, according to what I experienced, basically that's what I took into my vehicle in my experience, were these engrams. Very strange things. I have a whole series of writings, my private writings, just mulling over in my own way the way in which programming takes place. And it's funny, over the years I've had some odd encounters with highly mystical people, sensitives, whatever you want to call them. And they're always convinced that I'm being manipulated by a higher power. That's very interesting. I mean, in the sense that there is some agency that is impacting me, and according to the voice, that's in fact the way that I'm actually operating. I mean, the guy who's this passenger in here is just watching the movie. I mean, there's nothing else I can possibly do but watch that movie. But I've had people do all kinds of weird things, the numerologists and the this and that and blah blah blah, and they all come up with the same thing basically. They all say that that I'm being influenced by the center of the galaxy, or I'm being influenced by the consciousness field of the Archangel Michael. And I've heard endless descriptions, particularly in the early years when I was doing free lectures, because when I was doing free lectures I got the whole flotsam and jetsam of the esoteric world showing up, and had some bizarre encounters with beings. So for me this is a kind of strange place. It gives me a strange feeling even to talk about it, because there's a level of this, I don't know if you can actually believe it, but there's a level of this that's actually embarrassing. And I think that's the funniest thing for me, because it's still embarrassing for me. It's sort of like, Rod, you have to say that. It's like, is it that important? Does anybody really need to know? See, in the beginning I thought, no, nobody should know any of this stuff. I mean, it's so important to get the beauty and the value of the knowledge itself into the hands of human beings. Why cloud it with all kinds of fuzzy, mystical... I mean, I don't want all these bunnies going around building temples. I mean, it's the last thing that I would want. I mean, it's the one thing that differentiates the way in which I see the archetype of my role being played out. I mean, after all, it's an archetypal role. You bring, you are a mystically inspired being who brings something new into the world. But, everybody else claims some kind of kinship. They were something. It was the something that they were, and their connection to the force that supposedly gave them the power. And, I know that for me that's not true. I have no connection in the conscious sense to what moved me in those days. What I have is an altered consciousness and a unique perspective on the nature of being. But that perspective on the nature of being, the validity of it would never have to be based on anyone believing that I'm the band too. Who the hell cares? This was my deepest held feeling at the time. And now, it's not that I particularly want it to be a bell that I ring for everybody. But I'm getting to a point in my life where I am so amazed by the validity of what was given to me. I'm so deeply gratified that I'm not a madman and I'm not a huckster, that human design is wonderful, helps people. It's an extraordinary thing, and will transform forever as long as there's humans the way in which beings see themselves interact with each other. This is only the beginning of that knowledge. And the fact that I see that I see how it has grown and how it has legitimized itself, I don't feel I have, I don't feel anymore that I can not reveal certain things. So that's the story of Ra Uru Hu, the band too, and who knows? Well, here we come to one of my favorite plates. The Rave is of the design crystal. The design crystal is never one without the monopole. The Rave is never one without love. The design crystal with the monopole has no form. So we have some very basic things to begin with. Everything about the nature of what it is to be us, this is the byproduct of the design crystal. And we've seen schematically, at least, or graphically, we have seen how that design crystal bundle ends up being both personality crystals and design crystals, that they're actually part of the same form source in that sense. And in many ways, what we call our personality crystals are simply advanced designs, if you will, in order to be able to filter the consciousness field in relationship to the design. The other thing you can see is that they come together out of the same principle. They are aspects, a binary out of the same principle. The Rave is never one without love. It is love, in fact, that is our life. Love's a funny word. Talking about love is odd. I've done endless courses on, love as seen through just about every aspect of human design that you can imagine. The love in G-centers and the love in electromagnetics and, the love in profile relationships and blah, 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 and on and on and on and on and on. But what love is that it's not death. See, I think the opposite of death is love rather than life, but that's just a kind of joke, but it's true. And it's true in the sense of not being endearingly schmaltzy and spiritual, but it's true just in the mechanics of what design crystal and monopole are all about. The design crystal with the monopole, there is no form. There's no illusion. There is no life. There is no life. So the only thing that will create life, this disembedding of the monopole, is that the disembedding of the monopole begins this deep yearning and longing and love, in that sense, of the monopole to reunite with the design crystal, which it will do at death. The whole thing about humans is that, we seem to think that love is something that belongs to us, instead of it's what we are. The Rave is never one. Never one. I'm talking about raves. They will never be one. The knowing of Abraham. This is the whole understanding. If you strip away all the stuff that is coded into the various theisms, that all this is truly saying is that what we are is an illusion of separateness, that we are never separate, that we are integrated into the whole. And whether you call the whole Yahweh, or whether you call the whole Allah, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't really make any difference. It is the first really profound understanding. We are never one, Never. But for us to understand what that really means, for us to be able to see as aspects, that in being aspects, our aspect is the deepest ingredient of being able to grasp that you are essential and perfect and absolutely connected to the Godhead. See, one of the things about uniqueness, in the moment that you truly can embrace uniqueness, you are divine. I mean, it's such a nice thing to think about. It's so hard for human beings, we're caught in this vast generalization, homogenization. It's all lumped together. And yet each and every one of us, in the potential of our uniqueness, is a singular Godhead. Absolutely, incredibly perfect. I mean, dazzling in the perfection. There is nothing like you. Each aspect, unique in the shattering. I mean, after all, the whole cosmology is based on the fact that the shattering creates the potentials of the uniqueness. I mean, the ultimate goal is to bring all the pieces back together again, somewhere billions of years down the line. And to see that as a unique, individuated aspect, that you are an essential ingredient to the whole. You think that you're just in an incarnation? It's like these 40,000 babies that die every hour. Absolutely essential. I mean, they've got the same crystals that go back to the same past, that go back to the same source, that are part of the same drama, that are integrated into the whole vast matrix of existence. Each and every one of us has a continuity through the aeons in all this. It's absolutely incredible. And you see, it's not like crystals are the kinds of things that you can sort of eliminate, get rid of, throw out. I mean, it is very, very rare, only at certain points in the vast cosmic history of the movement of the crystals are there times of certain crystals being annihilated. And it's en masse, because it's an aspect no longer necessary for the development of the totality. But you see, your crystals, they've been through the whole movie. They're part of the continuity of the whole process, whether you recognize it or not. Whether you're aware, awake, it doesn't make any difference. See, the program has built in its own advantages. You go to sleep, after all. And the moment you go to sleep, all the dumbness of, your passenger in its waking moments are eliminated. And the programming goes on anyway. And you contribute to the programming anyway. Out of your uniqueness, and we can't do without it. We can't. It's so important to understand that. This is, the deepest theme for us. Is that we are never one. We are the aspects that are within the whole, and yet we are the essential aspects of the whole. A rave is always connected to love, as the design is always connected to the monopole through the string. We are always, people would, I remember in the beginning when I began to tell people to love themselves. Oh, jeez. You'd think that I told them to go outside and masturbate in a public park. They went nuts. The hubris, the vanity, the this and that and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized something. that people hated themselves. And it was a terrible joke because they didn't know who they were hating. I mean, it wasn't like they were hating themselves, they were hating their not-self. You see, you can only love yourself when you are beyond comparison. There's no other way. There's no other way. You see, the moment that there's a part of you that wants to be this or that, the moment there's a part of you that regrets this or that, the moment there's a part of you that wants to change this or that, you're lost. See, loving oneself is accepting that one is unique, that there is nothing like you. Can't be, will never be, has never been, ever. Every life that you've ever had, every incarnation that you've ever moved through has been different. You've had a different design crystal every time. The illusion has always been different. And underneath is this unique personality, the continuity of the consciousness program. We do not exist without it. You know, there is, if you think about the hold on, let me change the illustration for a second. If you go back to this illustration and you think about, you know, this bundle there at the beginning, and if you think away of what that looks like, and then we talk about how this is going to shatter and all break apart, there's a prana. There's a huge prana in all of this. You know, there is the shattering, and then there is the coming together. And this shattering and coming together is something that has happened. It is part of the program. And ultimately we're moving towards a point where the aspects that have shattered outward, that ultimately these aspects have to find a way back together again. It is in essence our destiny. That means that you have to be there. They can't do that without you. They can't. Do you understand? Not like you have a choice whether you're going to be there or not, because that's not the point of this description. It's to understand how magnificent you are, how magical you are as a being, how magical everyone is. They just don't get it. We're all essential. It's not like we really understand. Do you think that the cell that's operating somewhere, you know, in your frontal lobe knows what the hell your life experience is about? Doesn't know anything about that. It's just going through its process. We're all going through our process. And yet the byproduct of that process is the totality. I had this wonderful friend of mine here on the island, and we were having an extraordinary conversation one day. And he said to me, he said, you know, Ra, he said, I have to give you some bad news. Bad news? Yeah. I got bad news for you. Okay, give me the bad news. He said to me, look, Ra, when I die, I'm going to take you with me. I've never heard anybody say anything like that. I said, what do you mean you're going to take me with you? Well, he said, it's all illusion, isn't it? I mean, you know, within the construct of my mind, I call you this and that, and we have this kind of relationship and that kind of relationship, and everything that I know about the world, I hold within the illusion of my mind, and when my mind is dead, the world is dead. I suck up the universe. And he told me that because he had introduced himself to me as God, which I found extraordinarily delicious, that anybody would have the chutzpah to call themselves God. And he had that. He introduced himself as God. You know, how can you be God? Well, when I die, I'm going to take you with me. And you see, it's true. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing about understanding uniqueness is understanding your own divinity. You know, your divine contribution to the whole. And it doesn't matter whether in the illusion it's a big fuck up and it's a mess. And that's not the point. It's not like it's your fault. It's not like you're in charge. It's not like you can do anything about it. You can't. There is no choice. There is only helplessness. And yet to see that in the choiceless helplessness of it, you are an essential aspect. We all are. I mean, I have my own difficulties with, saying I'm this aspect or that aspect. But I also know something, that so I am, and so are you. And it doesn't make any difference where you are in the hierarchy, where you are on the fractal. We're all absolutely essential. So loving yourself, this is something that is profoundly magical. Because it's not what can be assumed that this is some kind of surface, some kind of little vanity. It's not. It's the most riveting truth. It's absolutely, absolutely riveting. There is only you. There's nothing like it. No comparison. No better, no worse. No this, no that. How can you compare? You can't. And then you can begin to see your mystical connection to life. Oh, wow, it's amazing to me how dead people are to the forces. How desensitized they've become. They get their mysticism in movies, about this kind of form and that kind of thing and blah, blah, blah. But they don't even know when the moon is full. They don't know what it means, to be in love with the perfection of their process. They don't. A rave is always connected to love, as the design is always connected to the monopole through the string, and that is the knowing of John the Baptist. Love, as the other John said, all you need is a little bit of it. It is about love. And it's not about, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's not about God loves us or Jesus loves us. We're not loved. We are love. It's very different. We're not loved. We are it. We are its very expression on the largest scale. We are the expression of love as a result of that vast design monopole construct ripping apart. And we're the result. So we are love. So you might as well stop looking for it. Because it's you. But the rave is never one with love. Not as long as it's in form, the knowing of Muhammad. And of course this is about the monopole and the design. We are love, but we are not one with it. We are it. It's a very different thing. And we are it as long as we're alive. And for me, it's such a beautiful thing to understand. I mean, it's so beautiful. Life is love. Being alive is the expression of love. And you see, for me, it doesn't matter what love means. I don't mean to play with you, but it's true. I mean, it's just so clear to me, that what we understand in the deepest sense of what love is, that all of that is such an illusion. because we cannot grasp it in that way. We are it. But the rave is form, and out of form it's not a rave. And this was the knowing of Buddha. I mean, most of you know I'm not a great Buddha fan. You know, he was the ultimate anti-yinist. There's a nice term. It's hard to call him a cosmic sexist, but I guess that's possible too. And this deep understanding in Buddha that the form is a trap. But you see, Buddha didn't like being loved. He didn't like this and that. So, out of the form, there's no love. But there is silence. This is what you can know. Not being one is the rave way. The joke is that the rave can never be one with love, because it is the expression of love. And you see in the cosmology that was given to me, you know, it is very clear that the temple and the God to worship in the temple is ourselves. It's just ourselves. Because we are the very expression of the deepest and most magnificent of processes. This vast creative consciousness program that's totally relying on us, each and every one of us. I mean, if anything from today, I hope you really have at least a taste of that. The possibility of what it means in terms of just your own consciousness, to begin to see not as a role that you're playing on the purpose game of the illusion, but at the deepest level, as a passenger, to see the truth of your uniqueness. And in that, to begin this process of loving yourself. I mean, this is all. It's all that the messenger ever looked for in the eyes of others, is this love that comes out of a deep surrender. It's a deep surrender. It's in that deep surrender that you find your uniqueness. It's in that deep surrender that you find your beauty. And it's a beauty that has no skin. It has nothing to do with that. It's like tapping into that whole long fractal line and riding that line all the way back to the burning birth, and understanding that every step along the way you have been an integrated part of it. Think about your personality crystal, and think about neutrinos going through crystals, programming and being programmed. The neutrino stream goes through, it leaves off its information, but as it goes through, it oscillates and it takes on information. Your personality crystals have been programming the totality for as long as there's been a totality. For as long as there have been neutrinos, you have been adding to the totality. You. 15 billion years, hard work. Long time job. Doing it every day. Been doing it every day for billions of years. And then I look at human beings on the mundane plane and how sorry they feel for themselves and how useless and undervalued and inadequate and on and on and on and on and all the stuff that we hear. And I know it began with the first body graph I ever looked at. I realized that the surface doesn't mean anything. It's just mechanisms. And you get the opportunity to watch your unique mechanism fulfill its program. Wow, it's quite something.